Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us as we continue our part two on debunking the myths that we often believe or are told. And I just wanted to validate how and really why we're doing this. I can't remember if we said this in part one, but I think the reason why this is so important and crucial to debunk some of these myths, especially early on in trauma, someone who's new to trauma, is because it can really distort your reality. It can distort how things really are in your experience, which can impact your healing process. And when you are in those early stages of trauma, your mind is already clouded. You're already feeling confused, fear. You are feeling a lot of self doubt. And so these myths can perpetuate the fear. It can perpetuate the doubts. And so I really hope that these two episodes help a lot of you feel less pressure, feel a little less confused, and that you really do walk away with some more clarity throughout these two episodes. I just feel like it's so critical to get clear on what is healthy and isn't. I was talking to a client the other day, actually, and we're going to debunk one of these today, is the difference between sobriety and recovery. And not at all. Like, what is actually healthy and being relational even look like? And when you don't know, and I can relate to that, when you don't even know what healthy looks like, it's easy to believe that your partners are in recovery, especially if they're doing a little bit different, when things feel maybe a tad bit different. So I want to validate the confusion around it. And so hopefully today helps. But Alana, before we dive into our next one on the list, is there something that you wanted to add to what I just said there?
No, I think
Okay.
that's really good.
All right. So the next myth that we want to talk about is that person, if the addict stops acting out, that the betrayed partner will just get better. That if he just stops, everything will go back to normal, or the one who has been injured will just be okay. Everything will be better.
I think this one, betrayed partners so bad want it to be true. And so they focus so much time and energy, I did, on how do we make sure that acting out never happens again so I can be better.
Yeah.
And it can be really disappointing if you do have a partner who does do the work and stops acting out and starts creating safety, and yet you're still left with the pain. And it's still there because that healing doesn't happen externally, it happens internally. And so I wish it were that simple that they're stopping the behavior would just heal you. The stopping the behavior stops continual pain from occurring, but it
Right.
does not heal the past and current pain that has already happened.
And I think in believing this myth, it minimizes the
Mhm.
significant psychological effects that happen when you experience betrayal trauma, including a lot of the PTSD symptoms that a lot of betrayed partners experience. So when we think, well, if they just stop, then I'll be better, minimizing the impact.
Mhm. And I'll just admit, so I had stuff come out about 8 years before the whole impact of stuff came out. So I got, I would say, like 5% and another 95% coming later. But the first time it was just go see our church leader. I don't want to hear about it. I mean, like, tell me that you're not doing it. I'll be fine. And the truth was, is I just shoot him off, go do your work. I'm really pissed. And then I shoved it all down and went on with my merry way. But that shoving it down didn't make the pain go away. I just was disassociated from the pain and then was confused why I was having all sorts of medical things and why I was having angry outbursts and why I was having these effects that I had no idea what they were attached to
Yeah.
because it was all suppressed.
Yeah, for sure. So then underneath that is the idea also that sobriety equals recovery. And not acting out again is all that it takes to build trust. And if we can just not act out anymore, then they're okay. And then if they're okay, I'm okay.
Yeah, so many myths in that, right? Sobriety does not equal recovery whatsoever. Stopping the behavior is a piece of the recovery work. I see so often, unfortunately, more often than not, the acting out partner doing the bare minimum to keep
Mhm.
their significant other content. That's not recovery. Recovery, usually, there's not a question whether they're working their recovery. When someone is really working their recovery, they are all in. And usually I hear more things along. I know he's doing or she's doing their work, but it still hurts. I know that they're doing change and I'm still having impact. I can see this, and I can feel that it's genuine. And yet this is still so hard. I hear more of that language versus the language when they're doing the bare minimum or they're just being sober, that idea of like a dry drunk. And
Yeah.
it's, well, are they in recovery? I mean, are they doing the work? They're telling me they're doing the work, but this doesn't feel right. Something feels so off and I don't know what it is. I'm
It's
just
that
really
confusion.
confused.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm
It's
really
that
confused.
confusion. When I have a client that just feels confused about it, like that confusion is not clarity. It is the opposite of it. And anytime there's that confusion, then I'm definitely noticing, I can always trace it back to their partner who has the acting out behavior is not doing their work. Because recovery, remember, real recovery is doing that deep dive into their own stuff, like family of origin work. It involves the dive, which is why sobriety comes first. And that alone takes time. Alana, I'm going to just announce it now, but we're getting ready to drop a whole series on full disclosures. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about is that we don't even touch a full disclosure without 90 days sobriety. So if those of you who like timeframes, that's what we're looking at with just sobriety. Recovery is when we're working on the deeper stuff, including empathy and transparency and all the things that we've been talking about before. But, anyways, I just think sometimes, like we've mentioned, the betrayed partner wants so badly to believe that they are in sobriety or that they're in recovery because it can often just mean, okay, we're almost over this and I'm almost out of all of the uncomfortable and I just want to get out of the uncomfortable. So totally get it, but it's not helpful to you and it's not helpful to your partner or the marriage when we're not seeing things as they really are there.
Yeah, so much of healing really is when we're based in reality.
Yeah.
And the other part of that, the not acting out again will mean trust is rebuilt or restored. And again, that is where we're not getting that continual injury, but that does not restore trust. And that in and of itself doesn't rebuild trust. There actually has to be additional work on top of that to rebuild trust. And I'll just say, sometimes this concept from my partner who has acted out feels really big and overwhelming.
Hmm.
And I've said this before on the podcast that sometimes it feels like I've never in my life been sober or my adult life. And now you're telling me I have to figure out how to be sober. Then I have to figure out how to relationship repair. And I have to figure out my childhood stuff. And it can feel really overwhelming. And the reality is, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It is just one step at a time, continually moving forward. But you have to have the energy behind it and that
Hmm.
all in energy.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does not work unless you are really committed to that growth and change because this is hard emotional work.
It really is hard emotional work. And it makes me, as you were talking, it reminds me of also hearing the betrayer get exhausted, like you're saying, right? There's just so much and they can get exhausted. And so they'll even say, well, I need to take a step back. And so I'll hear, like, well, I want to stop working every week and do every other week, or I want to drop group and then just do this. They start to negotiate the important pieces of what is required for continued sobriety and recovery. And so that's just something to look out for and be aware of that isn't on our list, but I can probably say this is another myth. As long as I'm just doing something, it's enough. But what you're saying there, Alon, I think is really key. It's that motivation and determination behind it for the individual that you're looking for, betrayed partners. And so if they're starting to scale back and this is too much and I think I want to take a break, then hopefully as you're working with your person, you can come up with a plan of what that looks like for you to protect yourself if they're going to take a break from the work, because there will be an impact there. And I think that's a myth that the addict taking a break from work is okay.
Yeah, we will be doing an episode that looks at the myths from the addiction side. There is this little fly that followed me in the room and now
Wants
is
to be a part of
my
our conversation.
my buddy. Speaking of buddies, I keep looking for those of you who are watching us on YouTube or on Spotify where you're actually watching the video. Amy has her little dog in the corner on the chair behind her, and she is so cute. So,
You, my little buddy.
we have buddies. Well, on my desk too, but I'm not going to show my cat because I'm not. But okay, back to this. Okay, so again, still on this same thread, if they have been sober for blank amount of time, then their partner should be better by now.
Mm.
Well, they've been working recovery for 4 years. That was 10 years ago. Why are they not better? Or I hear betrayed partners say that. We've been at this for a year. What is wrong with me? Why am I not better? And healing happens when healing happens. That's the first piece. The second piece is every time frame is different for every single person. And that's a hard pill to swallow,
Yeah.
especially if you're comparing yourself to people around you. Because sometimes what on the surface looks like someone's really rocking their recovery, you don't know what's happening underneath. And you also don't know what their good days look like versus their bad days. And you may only be getting witness to part of it.
Yeah, I like that reminder, and I'm thinking of our partners who are in those support groups, betrayed support groups where the comparative suffering kicks in, and it's very easy to compare your story to the others, your journey, your progress to others. So being mindful of that, I think we can I'm not trying to add a bunch of myths, but I think that would be another one, right? Just like your journey is yours and it is not linear, and to not compare it to other people that can really hinder your own personal progress. You said something earlier. I'll just repeat. It is one step at a time. I love the framing it like, what is that next right step just right now? And if you can put that on a dang sticky note if you have to, and remind yourself of that over and over, it can be really helpful. The next one is the betrayed partner. So this is the myth. The betrayed partner can't share their story because it isn't theirs to share. This one, when we were going over these, this one just still, I will be honest, tends to activate me in my own journey, having been told that I could not share, could not tell anybody about what was happening. It wasn't just even about his acting out. It was when he lost his company and we were destitute. I was selling everything I could think of just to get by. No, don't tell anybody. Just that secrecy that an addict will want to hold on to and expect you, demand even you to protect their secret when it is obviously impacting you and your children. And I bought into that. I definitely felt like I needed to protect my husband. I needed to protect him from judgment from other people, because at that point, I wanted to have hope. I wanted to believe that he would make things better and that we would make it. I remember also buying into this because I thought, if he gets better, if he fixes everything, I don't want my family or other people then judging him or judging me. So I just want to validate that too. I hear that a lot. I shared that thought. But I think the myth here, Alana, is that your story is yours. Your impact is yours. How you are experiencing their behaviors is yours. And whether that's not maybe necessarily getting a megaphone and standing on top of your roof and sharing it, but it definitely part of your healing requires you to get support, healthy support from safe people to share your story.
I heard a quote the other day on TikTok because lately that's where I hear all my cool quotes. But it was so good. I wrote it down and I've shared this with so many clients. It says, dysfunctional families prefer dishonest unity to honest conflict.
Mm,
I'm going to say that again.
yeah, yeah,
Dysfunctional families prefer dishonest unity to honest conflict. And in AA, they talk about how a family is as sick as their secrets.
yeah.
And it's really natural for a healthy individual or unhealthy, but for an individual to really want to protect their attachment. They
Mhm.
want to protect that person. That's really normal and natural, and often to protect ourselves. But when we are part of that secrecy and part of that system, part of healing is stepping away from that secrecy, stepping into the light, stepping into that transparency and that honesty, even when they're not willing to. So I love how you said, we're not going to get a megaphone. We're not going to get on Facebook and say, hey, just so you all know, my partner did da da da. Don't do that. There's nothing healthy about that. But finding those healthy, safe people, like you said, Amy, to get that support. And like Brene talks about, really learning how to own your story.
Yeah,
When you really own your story, this is Brene Brown, it's then that you can write that brave new ending.
yeah. It sheds the shame. And she's all about the shame part. And so when you aren't sharing and speaking that out, then it just feeds and perpetuates the shame. And shame is really the root of a lot of this. One other thought around this really quickly is that I do think there's a difference because you and I, as we've run groups, have seen both. There is a difference in sharing your story. I just want to fill in the gaps here, Alana, but I want to encourage the sharing story is your experience, how you've been impacted and experienced from your partner's behaviors rather than trashing your partner and focusing on him. And here's twofold why this is going to help you heal when you focus on this. Number one, when you are turned towards you and your experience and how you're being impacted, it is bringing you into that reality. Okay. It's helping you see what really is, pulling you out of denial, minimization, rationalization, justification. It also pulls you out of the hypervigilance that is very common when you are new to betrayal because you are hyper focused on him and what he is and isn't doing. And when we're so focused on, well, if he's doing good, then I'm okay. And if he's doing bad, then I'm not okay. It's impeding your healing journey. I get it. It's a process. It takes so much freaking time to get out of that hypervigilance. Obviously, there's massive compassion here if you're relating to what I'm saying. But I just wanted to highlight the difference specifically when we say share your story. It's special.
That I think is really important to highlight. Because if you've never really had a voice or never been given permission to share your experience, that is quite common. Sometimes women or men new to group is like, yeah, let me tell you all the things my partner has done. And they will tell graphic details. And at that point, you are sharing all of these things you've been traumatized by, and you can share similar information. But when it's coming through, I am really struggling, and here are my impacts, and here's how it's been impacting me. That is such a different narrative than they did this, and they did this, and they did this. And one, like you said, aids in your healing. The other one, that type of venting, all it does is it keeps you spinning in it. And you've probably seen these people who years later, years, I've seen people 40, 50 years later, the minute you bring something up, it's like it happened the other day, and they're telling you all about how they were wronged and what this other person had done, and they had just stayed in it.
Yeah.
And so, what we're giving you is really a roadmap for owning your experience, your story, which aids in your healing and moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Love how you wrap that up. Okay. Good stuff. Next one. When I read a book on healing, I need to follow all the steps and do it just right. And I'm going to add, when I see most with this myth, do all the steps and do it right, I often see there's another part that comes along with this, the part that's worried about getting it wrong.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if you notice that about yourself, that, oh my gosh, I just have to do it right because if I do it wrong, then, and there's a lot of different paths that can take, but ask yourself that. If I don't do all the things and I don't check off the list and I don't do it right and I get it wrong, then what? And maybe go through and then what, and then what, and then what about 4 or 5 times and see what's at the bottom of that for you in particular, because I see this show up a lot. I get that psychoeducation is really helpful, especially to new trauma individuals, but it can get you caught up and even stuck when you are just trying to do all the right things that one particular book tells you. Alana, how many freaking books have you and I read and that are available now? Which, by the way, isn't it amazing? Like just in the last 10 years, how much research and how many. So I love it. I love being able to have more resources now than ever to refer our clients to. But because there's so much now, I do see a lot of people getting caught up in, well, this person said do this, da, 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 da. Well, this person said do da, 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 da. And then you get stuck.
And the reality is not everything, even in the best of books, will apply to you.
Right.
On this podcast, it's your job and responsibility to filter through what Amy and I say and go, oh, yeah, that actually applies to my situation. That feels right for me. Or, no, actually, I hear them, but that's not for me. That's not mine. And so, any resource you pick up, whether it be a book or a blog, a podcast, whatever, a website, as you're filtering through that, there will be advice in there that absolutely does not fit your story.
Mhm.
And it's funny because I just transferred all of my books, not all of my books, but a good chunk of my books from my home office to my office. And one of my clients came and she's looking through 'em and I forget how she said it, but something along the lines of, I don't agree with all the points in some of those books. And I'm like, neither do I. Like, totally. There are books on here that have some really good pieces, and it's enough for me that I may pull that book out and resource that piece, but I may throw away 50% of that book, but whatever piece I chose to keep the book for is still enough to keep the book. But
Mhm.
that is a skill. And then I will just say there
Ooh,
are
that
certain,
is a skill. Thank
yes,
thank you for saying that. That is okay. Yep, it is a skill.
it is a skill and you have to learn how to do it. And there's certain diagnoses that have a harder time doing that. So you have certain personalities that have a harder time doing that, but also you may have a diagnosis of autism or OCD, or well, I'll just stick with those two, that it may be really hard for you to sort through that. And so that's why I like saying it's a skill of you can practice really going internally and saying, how does this sit with me?
That's
Yeah.
what I think is the skill, is being able to ask yourself those questions, and this is building self-trust. This is coming back towards you. So that's the skill. And I love that you framed it that way.
And here's the therapist in me though, right? Because sometimes we will read something in a book and it's like, ooh, I don't like that. And I don't like that because I am resisting that reality and that truth.
Mhm.
Even sorting through that, there's times where I've sat with my therapist and he will say something and I will literally go to him. I'm like, I don't like that. And he's like, do I push back on it? I'm like, no, I don't like it because it's true. I don't like that because this is uncomfortable. I'm not disagreeing with it. I just don't like it. And so even sorting through that and recognizing what are things that are uncomfortable that I don't like, but still resonate within me as truth. And what are things that I recognize that's not truth for me? That's not my truth. That really is something to practice and
Yeah.
learn to listen to yourself and rebuild that intuition.
Yeah. Yeah. Which all
Not rebuild the intuition. Sorry. Intuition's there. Rebuild your trust in your intuition.
trust and you interest. Great clarification. Correct. Yeah. Okay. Love it. Next one. Separation. Ooh, okay. Separation for couples leads to divorce and is never a good idea. This definitely was some classic advice from a majority of therapists that were not trained and educated in betrayal, trauma, and sexual addiction and the impact of couples, which is why, Alana, you and I highly recommend finding couples that is associated with APSATs, because any couples therapist that goes through APSATs is betrayed partner sensitive. And I also just want to reference, if you have not heard our, gosh, I think we did 4 episodes on separation, really, really good ones not too long ago. So go back and listen to that because we tackle and go into this even deeper. But this is definitely a myth. And I think what I would differentiate here when we're talking about separation, what I find the most helpful is starting off with minimal separation, like a couple days, a week, maybe a couple weeks, where 2 weeks is actually where I see the most my clients, my partners who take 2 weeks away from the influence and from their partner and the impact, that is where I see the majority of my clients go to that "Oh" place, like, "Ah, now I'm starting to see how my body regulates." Now, like, they start to see more into themselves when they get a good chunk, like, at least 2 weeks' time. That's been my observation, and it's so cool because that's when they start to get clarity. All of those 8 characteristics of the higher self, they start to get clarity, courage, they start to feel self-compassion, like all the things. It's really, really cool. It's important. And I'm going to talk to the betrayer right now. Luke and I did an episode together on his podcast about this. And we talked to y'all who are scared that your partner wants a separation. We validated that. But this is to meet the request of your partner who's asking for this space, is how you show up and is part of your recovery. So I hope that if you're feeling threatened by that, please work with a professional to help guide it. There are some really great guidelines and parameters that we can put in place to help protect. But this is really important. Alana, I don't know about you, but I have yet to see a couple recover where they haven't had a decent, healthy separation.
I have seen some, but I have seen so many benefits of this separation. And the separation leads to a divorce. That fear comes from they're wanting to separate from me because they don't want to be around me. And in my experience, most of my betrayed partners do a separation because they need space to heal because they want to save the relationship. And not all relationships are salvageable. So I won't even pretend that they are when you do a therapeutic separation and when you're each doing your work to move forward and to reconcile if that's what's healthy and stable for both of you. The separation is a period to allow for that stability to occur so you can come back together and interact in a more stable way. So we're not causing additional damage on top of the damage that's already been done.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
Also, I see a lot of this pressure come from religious, either circles or leadership. I had that. There
Yep.
was a lot of messaging, not only messaging I got just growing up, but like active messaging of people's advice that they were giving me. And that was for me where I really had to just get into myself and get clear with what I needed. Uh, Even the little bits of space gave me enough clarity to go, oh my gosh, I have to have a separation to heal. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying you do, but that's what I knew that I needed. So when that pressure around me came from whoever it came from, while it still impacted me, I knew what my truth was and I knew I needed it. So I didn't have to carry what they thought as my reality. I could tap into what I knew for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I am curious though, what would that look like for a couple who when they're dysregulated and they don't separate, what would that look like to not go through a separation, even if it's in-house, even if it's like, I just feel like there has to be some level of separateness in order to heal. So you said, well, I've seen it work where there hasn't been separation. How does that happen?
Well, I think they managed to work through it. They have worked through it.
Mm,
It's just a harder road. It's a harder road because you're getting triggered often, more often, because you are in each other's space and getting triggered way more frequently. And so there's the navigating those triggers, and often it is harder and longer.
yeah. Okay. Next one. The myth is because this is a relational impact, we should start doing couples counseling as soon as possible.
Oh, this is what maybe not every, but I'm going to say every person who has acted out wants to start with. Of can we just heal us? We need to just do couples. Let's do couples. Let's do couples right now. And usually that comes from, we have to fix this. This is so painful. We're not okay. And all of the attachment alarms are going off in their brain. So it becomes so much of we need to fix us. And then when we do that too soon, we can lose here's the pieces that I have to fix first. I'm speaking to the person who's betrayed. You bypass all of your things that led you to all of the acting out behaviors. And now we're focused on our partner, which I will say it makes sense why the brain would go to that because that would feel so much easier and more comfortable to just fix that immediate fire. But we can put out that fire right in front of us while there's a forest fire raging behind us. We
A
need to,
really great analogy. It is a really great analogy. Piggybacking off our last myth, I do see this sometimes when there has been separation. My partner will feel the difference. They'll start to feel some regulation. They come back together, jump into some couples. They want to jump into phase three in our multidimensional partner trauma model. They want to start repairing the relationship when, hey, we just got stabilization. We need to continue to work on safety. There's some pieces that still need to be put in place. And they want to go to that relational recovery work super quick. This is where attachment starts to come in because, like you're saying, it does feel better and it feels like we're putting out some fires. But I love that analogy there. Yeah, there's still a forest fire going on. There's still a lot of things that we need to tackle and put out first. It's a good analogy there. But I just guess
I,
want to validate why that can seem like it's helpful to jump into couples. At times, my partners will be like, I like the comfort. I want a partner. And so if he's even giving me breadcrumbs, it feels better than nothing. So I get that.
yeah. And this is where I'm trying to think if I can do this fast because we're not going deep diving into all of these, but I do believe in early couples recovery work when it is not actual couples therapy. I do believe having those bridges early on helps us come back together, but that is not in place of individuals. And that's not we're meeting every single week to work on the couple relationship. It is, we are doing these checkpoints early on to make sure that we're connected and on the same page. And then as it is safe, we can start increasing that. But again, not in replace of the individual work. Because that's what I see so often is the second that they start couples, then let's be honest, coaching and therapy is expensive. And so it's this, okay, well, if we're going to do couples now, we're going to stop our individuals. We're just going to focus on couples. And then that's where I see often a lot of stalling out because we do lose that focus. So the early couples recovery model that talks about what are some key building pieces that we want to keep that bridge to our relationship open. And I'm not talking about abuse here. So I just want to be clear if there's active abuse, this is not what I'm talking about.
You
But for my couples that don't have active abuse and it is safe enough to have these checkpoints early on, I do support that 100%. But that's where I really rely on the professionals working with them to help gauge and judge when to bring that in and when we need to back off on that. You as an individual will also know, but sometimes all of those attachment cries that we have can murky the water.
Yeah. I re I really appreciate you going. I was gonna say, "Hey, can you tell us the difference between couples work and couples therapy?" And you did. So if you are there is a difference, maybe go back and just listen to Alana specify that a little bit more. And Alana, I think this all of them can be, but I think this would be a really good whole episode to talk about the difference that you just stipulated there. Thank you for briefly sharing the difference. There is a difference. I really like that clarification. The next one is it's the acting out partner's problem. So the betrayed partner shouldn't have to do any recovery or healing. Wouldn't that be great?
Well, it's funny because part of me is like, well, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably already doing some.
Yeah.
And I know because I've had them come to me and who later became active clients who said, yeah, I listened to you for like 6 months and a year before I was ready to dive into the actual work. And first of all, I just want to validate the fact that you're here listening. You are putting effort in. I want to give you credit for that.
You're getting curious. It's good.
Yeah. You're getting educated. And there is a difference between being educated and learning about something and actually emotionally opening up, letting yourself feel, letting those emotions move through you, letting it process, letting yourself have that relational support outside of your significant other and possibly with your significant other. This is a relational injury, and we heal relational injuries in relationships, which is why having a secure attachment with a coach or a therapist, having group support, having friends who understand, having others who are further along in the journey make all the difference in your recovery. And so, as you're listening to this, if you have been betrayed, wherever you are in the journey, I want to give you credit for that work. And then you yourself will know if and when we need to add more.
Yeah. And as you're talking, it made me think about our friend and colleague Hope Ray's work and her definition of betrayal violence. And I think just as painful as this may be for some of you earlies to hear, the reason why this is a myth is because when you have been living in false reality because your partner has kept you there by deflecting, by hiding, by lying, by not giving you full access to truth, to what is happening in your relationship, to happening to your body, happening in your life, that alone is taking your agency away. That alone is impacting your entire nervous system and your world as you see it and as you experience it. And it is, to use Hope's word, violently impacting every area of your life. And when you become aware of even just a piece of your reality, the impact that has is very significant. And I'm so sorry to those of you who are experiencing this and are still trying to wrap your head around what the hell just happened. You're maybe still feeling some shock around some of the reality information that you're just getting, that reality collapse, right? Anyways, I just want to validate that. And this is why it's a myth, because it does impact you. You didn't choose it. And when you are impacted by something that you didn't choose, it is violence. And so I want to validate that very compassionately and tenderly. That's why this is a myth.
It was beautifully put.
Okay, next one. Addicts just need unconditional love, not boundaries or accountability. And I'm going to add addicts just need unconditional love from me. That's how I try to do it. They just need unconditional love, not boundaries or accountability. Why, Alana? Is this a myth?
If love were enough, we wouldn't have all these people doing this. There was a video that came out, I don't know, about a decade ago, 15 years ago. And it was on how the opposite of addiction is connection. And he shows this video. You can probably look it up on YouTube. I have nothing against the video. I'm just going to give you my response to the video when I was going through my trauma. So it shows all of these little mice running around, and this guy's giving maybe a TED talk. I'm going off memory, so bear with me. But he talks about how these men had gone off to war and how they were, I think it was cocaine. They were doing cocaine all the time. And then they came home, and some, as soon as they got home, they just no longer were on the drug. They just weren't addicted. They just didn't do it. But then you had others who were addicted the rest of their life. And he was talking about what's the difference. And then he talked about these mice and gave this research they had done about these mice and giving them cocaine and how they had created this, I think they call it like a rat park. Maybe it was rats, a rat park. And when the rats had all of this like connection and happiness in their life and things they could do, they didn't go to the cocaine in the same way that the others were deprived of that connection. And so, in essence, they said the opposite of addiction is connection. And I remember being so upset by this because I was like, you don't understand. Like, I did everything. We had the rat park. Like, we went out on dates twice a week, sometimes more. We were hanging out all the time. We were having a very active sex life. We were laughing. We were going out with friends and staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning playing Guitar Hero. Like, we were going mountain biking. We were going boating. Like, we had all of the pieces. He had the job, he had the money, he had the wife, the family. Like, he had the rat park. Well, why was that enough? He had connection, he had opportunity to connection. And what I had learned is that he had developed addiction long before all of those things. And so just planting him in this rat park didn't make a difference because he didn't have the ability to connect by that point in his life. Not at a deep, intimate level. So while that is still accurate and true, that connection absolutely is needed and impactful, I could never give him enough connection. I could never give him enough love. I could never give him enough stimulus or whatever it is he was seeking because there were internal broken things within him that he needed to figure out and heal for himself. So, long winded way
Love
of
that.
saying,
I love
nope,
that.
it's a myth.
Yeah, no, I love that. And just one more quick thing to add to that, because I really love that you shared that study. It's a really powerful study. And your point there, I think, is also really important. It touches on some of the other myths we talked about and why real recovery is also that deep dive into one's family of origin history. Because what we see so often, Alana, right, is how this does start way before the coupleship was created to begin with. And that connection, not only to external people, like the study shows, but it's the connection to yourself.
Mhm.
It's Father Richard Ward talks about in his book, Falling Upward. It's that mirroring image, a healthy image. And he talks about it with higher power God. But when you don't have that from primary caregiver, you don't learn how to mirror back a healthy self image and connect to yourself, which is why there's so many pieces and layers to this, y'all. And there's no quick, like I know all of you want. So just yeah, wanted to add that piece there. It's not just an external connection. And I thought I could give that external connection when, like you said, I provided the freaking playground, right? It's so much deeper and personal, individual, which is also why we do the individual work. Okay. Last one, y'all, that we're going to cover today. Remember, this is not a one and done, but these are the ones that we're going to highlight. Last one. The myth is that having boundaries just shames the acting out partner and really shouldn't be used if they aren't needed. We're ending with a really good one. We're ending with boundaries, which is the hardest one
Part
for a lot of our people.
part of me wants to be like, okay, now pause here and go listen to all of our episodes all about boundaries because
Yeah.
I feel like boundaries, there's so many pieces to them that it is really hard to condense it little. But at the same time, Boundaries are inherently about you. And so it is very simple. So I'm just going to like own it's super complex and super simple. But boundaries are not about the other person. They're not about what you want them to do or not do. They're not about how you're trying to get other people to act. They are about what for you are you willing to accept and not accept? What for you are your values? What for you are things you're going to do in your life to protect your energy? And so it really has nothing to do with other people even though it feels like it does, it has nothing to do with other people. And just for my people who've been working recovery a little bit longer, I had an aha the other day about boundaries in one of my sessions. So I was talking about boundaries and I was going over some of the boundaries I've had throughout my life. And my therapist, he said, what's really interesting, but all of the boundaries that you just shared with me are very, how did he put it? He didn't use the word defensive boundaries, but he's like, "They're boundaries you've had to put up because you have had a lot of close people in your life to you who have not been emotionally safe. And so by necessity, you've had to create all of these boundaries and really own for yourself of, hey, that's actually crossing the line. I'm not okay with it. And so therefore, if this happens, here's how I'm going to protect myself." And he said, "What about the boundaries of just you getting really clear with what you want and what type of energy you want to interact with and what type of people you want in your life and what type of things do you want to invite in? What if we looked at boundaries through that lens?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is uncomfortable because I have been here for how long, how many years and teaching boundaries for how many years through such this lens of here's the things as unhealthy people around me are causing pains. Here's the way I need to protect myself, which is absolutely true. And if you've been betrayed, there's probably some really key things you need to put in place to protect yourself. But also, you get to choose what type of people or energy or experiences you want to bring into your life too.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. When we think about the shame piece is what's sticking out to me is that having boundaries just shames the acting out partner. And I think that's where, like you're talking about, also being very clear with the difference between a boundary versus an ultimatum and a demand. I think that's where the shame can be implemented because I think when we use ultimatums and demands, it can create shame because it's implying that it can imply that the person's worth or value is conditional upon meeting that specific expectation or that behavior. And that's where the person receiving the ultimatum or demand can feel like, well, if I don't do that, then I am worthless or not good enough for you. So, learning the difference between ultimatums, demands, requests, boundaries, learning the difference between what those actually are. And there's a difference even between a request and a boundary. And when you can ask for a request and boundary, right? If there's no safety and abuse happening, we don't make requests. We have boundaries. So learning the difference between those can be really helpful.
Do you remember when you and I were in that level one coaching class together? And the teacher or presenter, she brought up about people having buttons and how if there's not a button to press within somebody, then it's not going to be activated. So, for example, if I think that I have the most gorgeous ears in the world, if somebody walks by me and they're like, nice ears, I'd be like, oh, thank you. Or if they're like, I don't like your ears, I'd be like, okay, like my ears are great because there's not a button there. Now, let's say I have a button around growing up. By the way, my mom didn't do this, but growing up, my mom always said, "You're going to be a terrible mom one day." Imagine if I'm a mother and I am fighting so hard to not be what my mom told me I would be, a terrible mom. And if somebody came and said something, even the littlest thing of, "Why did you do that with your daughter?" I have a big button and the littlest thing that touches my button, whoa, all of a sudden, because the button's there, the button has been pressed, I can be really mad at that person for pressing my button when they could have been trying to be difficult or they could have just been asking a question. but it was my own button that was triggered. So when it comes to shame, acting out partners, when you are doing things that are outside of your value system, feeling that guilt for that is very common. When you've been doing it repeatedly for a long time, it is very common that I see shame come up, and that shame says, I am a bad person, or I'm an unworthy person, or I'm a broken person. And so they have this big shame button. So you addressing behaviors might, no matter how perfectly you phrase it or how gently you try to address it, you addressing something around their behaviors can press that shame button, and they may blame you for that shame button. It is their shame button. So you addressing it does not mean that you are shaming them. It's they are feeling shame. It is their shame to work through. And this is when I'm talking to partners, I slow this down around address behaviors that you are okay with and you aren't okay with. Avoid character attacks.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
behaviors are when you did this, I am not okay with that.
mhm.
This really hurt me. This fill in the blank, I will not tolerate. All of those things absolutely can touch on their shame button, but you are addressing behaviors that's very healthy.
Yeah,
But when you go, you are so effing broken and you don't know what you're doing. Why are you so stupid? Or you really think you can get away with this? You are such a piece of crap. Or fill in whatever thing you say. We are attacking character.
yeah.
When we are attacking character, we ourselves are in unhealthy territory.
Mhm.
So that's the difference. And then their shame is theirs to work out, and that's not ours to own.
Really beautifully put. I have nothing else to add. That was really well put. Yeah. It's why there's a difference between sobriety and recovery because recovery has to dig into all of that and the root of where that comes from.
That was our last one for the betrayed partners myths. There's so many other myths out there. We could
Oh my
pick
god.
any fact we could throw out a myth that somebody out there has been perpetuating.
This
The
covers a lot. I think this is lays a really good foundation. We don't want to overload you. Let's start here.
This is how I'll wrap up. All this last week, I was in a Harley Davidson riding course. It was like 30 hours. There was so much learning and so much riding bikes. And I'm not going to lie, I felt pretty badass. I'm
It
very
is
proud of myself.
amazing.
And I
Amazing.
passed by some miracle. No, I worked hard. But the phrase that they kept using at the course is they kept saying, you ride your own ride. Even when somebody is flying ahead of you just ride your own ride. Even if somebody is being unsafe, you ride your own ride. When you are navigating the highways, you ride your own ride. That kept coming up. And as we're going through all of these different ways that we can be impacted, you're riding your own ride. This is your own journey, and you are the expert in your own life. And sometimes we get disconnected from that reality and that truth, but you have all of the answers in you. You're using us as guideposts to help you, but ultimately those answers are there. And as you really do your own healing work, as you really connect back to self, return to home, and you do that healing, you'll know. You'll know that next right step and you'll be able to sort through and get this clarity. So be patient with yourself as you do this and ride your own ride. As always, thanks for hanging out with Amy and I this week. And we look forward to seeing you all next week.
Are you a woman struggling with unwanted sexual behavior? Whether it's reoccurring challenge or a one-time incident, Choose Renewal is here to support you and your journey to recovery and healing. Our group offers a nurturing environment and a community where you can find understanding, guidance, and strength to make healthy changes in your life and your relationships. At Choose Renewal, we focus on emotional intelligence, processing, and integrative attachment to help you understand your emotions and their role in these unwanted behaviors. By sharing experiences and coping strategies, we empower each other to cultivate healthier relationships with others and ourselves. Our group provides a non judgmental environment where you can explore your challenges and triumphs without fear or stigma of shame. Together, we work towards personal growth, self discovery, and lasting transformation. So, whether you're a woman who is just beginning recovery journey or you've been working on it for some time, Choose Renewal offers support, encouragement, and camaraderie. Join us to navigate healing and embrace the opportunity to renew yourself and reclaim your life. Our group meets weekly on Tuesdays, and you can register by visiting chooserecoveryservices.com or check the show notes for a link.